What up, my ninjas? I'm Strident, and I am back with a little extra piece to my Amazing Spider-Man movie review. My homeboy, the Geek Underground, he explained some things in the comment section, or pointed out some things, and I answered some of his questions there, but I wanted to go back and add on top of that. I was kind of caught up in the moment, and I kind of left out some, I guess more detail on some things. And I figure I'll take this opportunity to kind of elaborate on some of those things that I kind of, just left out. You know, I guess where do I start? The main thing musically, the movie was kind of lacking, and I know I mentioned the music kind of briefly in the actual vid, but there was no like definitive theme. And I remember watching a video years ago where it was like a Superman toy and a Spider-Man toy, and it was like Superman versus Spider-Man. That's what made me click it. So I go to click it, and it was Superman pretty much explaining why, it was a Superman figure explaining why Spider-Man and most of the Marvel heroes don't manage to hit the heights that Superman and Batman have. It's pretty much they rely on relatability, this general sense of coolness, but not like this iconic sense of coolness. And then they cite their theme songs, how Spider-Man has yet to have a definitive theme song past the old school 60s cartoon theme song that we all, remember. Spider-Man's like, yeah, of course I got a theme song. And he's like, okay, well then hum it. And he's just like duck it, 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 and he's making all the effects and the weirdness. That's the intro of the Danny Elfman theme to the Spider-Man films, and you realize that that's exactly 100% true. He points out how overly relatable, quote unquote, they make the characters and things like that, and it's true. But the theme is what I was focusing on. There's no theme. There needs to be a theme that plays over and over throughout the movie in different ways, just like in the Dark Knight trilogy, even though the Dark Knight trilogy's music could go to something else. It's not as iconic as Danny Elfman's theme for Batman that you've seen in all most of the animated series, or Shirley Walker's theme, or Nick Arundel's theme from Arkham City. Those things don't. The movie themes for Bats, the new movies, they're not 100% iconic Batman. And Spider-Man has that same problem. The Amazing Spider-Man has the same problem. The other thing is, the Running Man pointed out that, the Geek Underground pointed out that, I don't know why I keep on mixing those two up. I don't know. I think I go back and forth a lot with some of these kind of stories or, posts with these guys. But the overall feel of the stories, the Raimi stories are cheesy. There's this cheese factor to it, because if you really think about it, Spider-Man is kind of a cheesy kind of character. He's always been kind of cheesy. How he decided to get his powers, I mean, and they make jokes about this in the good stories that are written, in comic books. But other heroes will be like, that's it? That's all that happened to you? You got bitten by a radioactive spider? So someone just practically served up your powers for you, and all you had to do was get bitten by a spider? Daredevil had to get fucking blinded and doused in chemicals and shit, and, the Hulk was in a horrible accident, like an explosion, and Wolverine had to undergo, I mean, he was a mutant to begin with, but he had to undergo that ridiculous surgery to become the Wolverine that we know today. Spider-Man had it really simple in that way. He just lost his Uncle Ben, which is the defining factor in his life. But Peter Parker has always been a cornball of a character, even with the powers. He just happens to have a cool power set. So we tend to, I don't want to say identify, but we tend to like vicariously live through him because his powers are cool. But the character himself, even though he is an everyman, because of the issues that he deals with, he's still very much a cheesy kind of non-representative character of non-representative example of, you know, most dudes aren't that corny. When it comes to relationships, he gets lucky. You know, he really is not smooth. I mean, and I'm not saying that no writer has ever written him smooth, but some writers forget how Spider-Man is supposed to actually be portrayed. When you go by the old Ditko and Lee stories, you see that he's just regular. He's extremely regular, and he's kind of awkward, just a little bit. He talks too much, and it gets him into these weird situations sometimes, and sometimes he can talk his way out of them. The Raimi films only got this half right. They got Pete right. I'm sorry, no. They got Spider-Man right. Like his acting, his movement, his fighting, his super heroics. They got that right. But the overall personality, like the you know, his speech and Peter Parker himself after college or after high school. God, why am I so off today? They only got high school Peter Parker right. After high school, they completely dropped the ball with Peter Parker. And then they got Spider-Man right as far as how he does what he does, but they didn't get his personality right. And that's because they failed on adult Peter Parker. This movie gets Peter Parker and Spider-Man like almost completely right. They kind of tweaked Peter Parker to be a more complete and not as goofy and cornball character. And because the world that they live in is a little bit more serious, it kind of helps. Whereas the previous world, and I mentioned some of this in my the previous video, the previous world was more of a cartoon. You know, it was like a caricature of the real world. You know, as far as taking this movie over the regular Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 3, I'll take it over 3. I wouldn't say it's completely better than Spider-Man 1 because it falls short when it comes to the superheroics. I mean, this Spider-Man was competent, which was cool, but he wasn't as amazing as the title says he's supposed to be. You know? There were things he did, but their approach to the web swinging was nice, but I mean, you could do more. You got to do more with a character like Spider-Man. I mean, I'm not alone in this feeling when I was done with the movie. I was happy because it was a cool ending and that last shot was freaking awesome, but I wasn't like overly impressed. I mean, like most people were so impressed. You probably, including, you know, yourself, you probably were impressed with the first Spider-Man the first time you saw it. You know what I mean? Like in comparison to all the other superhero films that are out there. So when it comes to judging this one against the other Spider-Man movies, or this movie against the old Spider-Man, the first two Spider-Man films, it's not that hard of a comparison for me, you know? Also, their treatment of Mary Jane in the Raimi movies was horrible. Like I said before, they gave us a complete woman in The Amazing Spider-Man. Mark Webb and his team, they understood that this character has to be multidimensional. Otherwise, there's no point to us watching her on the screen, you know? She has to share the screen with Spider-Man and Peter Parker, so she has to be at least halfway interesting, and she was cool, you know? If I was his age and I came across a girl like that, and I actually have come across girls that are kind of like that, and I was interested in them. You know what I mean? I made sure I did what I had to do so that I could get my time with them. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like one crew understood everything about the character, whereas the other crew, they seem to only understand aspects of the character. And that's where the Raimi films are not perfect. And I said this in the first part too. You know, I lean more towards this movie when it comes to the main two characters' personalities being complete, or at least close to complete. The lizard, I don't know. I prefer the design from the comics. Any version of the comics, the one where he looks like an iguana, or the one where he looks like your traditional lizard man with the coat on and all that stuff. I didn't really dig this design, but it worked in the film. It wasn't horrible. I don't know. That's really it. I just feel that The Amazing Spider-Man, it had good, like I said, competent direction, competent action. It was pretty creative in some places, like when he was hanging the cars off of the bridge. I thought that was awesome when he caught the cars. You know, there was several of them hanging. Kind of like how spiders do with flies when they catch them and all that stuff. That was cool, but overall the fights weren't that amazing. The one fight in the school was pretty cool, but I mean, he was taking off his mask for no reason, and it's like no cameras caught that stuff. You know, there were stupid things like that I just was like, are you serious? Not to say that the Raimi ones doesn't have similar things too, but usually it's a secluded area where most of the fights are taking place, so there's no cameras to catch his face off, except for on the train. And I was like, really, guys? But I still was more satisfied with Spidey's performance in the Raimi films because they're just more creative with what they made him do. You know, he was more. I saw more of Mark Bagley's Spider-Man stuff, which is the majority of what I read was, you know, Amazing Spider-Man, not Web of Spider-Man, because Alex Saviuk was doing it when I started reading. But it was mostly, I think, Spectacular Spider-Man and regular Amazing Spider-Man and all that stuff. I was reading that, and Mark Bagley drew some awesome scenes, and there was awesome action, and it seems like the team that did the original, the Raimi ones, they knew about that stuff and they read that stuff and they referenced it. Whereas this stuff seems like they referenced the more downplayed superheroics to go for this more realistic, quote unquote. And you know how much I hate that shit. Superheroes and realistic. I don't want that in my movies. I want shit that I'm going to be like, wow, you can do that? Or how the hell did he do that? And still be amazed enough that I'm not trying to create some type of logic behind how they did what they did. I just want to be amazed at what they do. The logic, the part where you have to make it make sense, that's what the movie makers are there for. They have to make the way that they do whatever amazing feat that they plan on doing, they have to make it work. And if they can make it work, then fuck the realism and all that shit. I just want the amazing part. You know what I'm saying? I want that done right. And to me, that's what Raimi's team did, and this team did it to a degree, just not to the same degree as Raimi's team. It's just me. I hope I kind of cleared up some stuff. I do agree, Mary Jane was so poorly done in those movies. Poor. It made me so kind of frustrated, because first they kind of fuck up Jean and Scott. They really fucked up Jean and Scott. There's no lies. I'm not even going to play around with it. Then they fucked up Superman and Lois Lane with Superman Returns, and that whole movie was just fucked up. And then they turn around and they do this with the, well, not the Amazing Spider-Man, but with the final Spider-Man of the three. And they fuck up that thing completely. It was like almost irreparable, having him slap Mary Jane, and he was dancing and shit. So when I saw this, I'm like, okay, thank God they started from scratch and the relationship felt somewhat real. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Peace outside, home.